Veryovkina Cave. With a depth of 7,257 feet, 2,212 meters, Veryovkina Cave stands as Earth's deepest cave. The magnitude of its depth necessitates over 4 days and thousands of feet of rope to fully descend. And what's the deepest cave without a few scary incidents? These are the tales that unfold. Situated on the border between Russia and Georgia lies the Caucasus Mountains, noteworthy for various reasons. Firstly, it houses Mount Elbrus, Europe's loftiest peak, towering at 18,500 feet, 5,639 meters. On the western side of the Abkhazia region lies a subset of the Caucasus Mountains known as the Gagra Range. This area hosts substantial mountains, the tallest of which stands just over 3,353 m. However, the distinguishing feature here is the Gagra Range, primarily crafted from limestone by ancient rivers over its geological past. These prehistoric rivers sculpted numerous deep canyons and Earth's largest known caves. In fact, the Gagra Mountains shelter 4 of the deepest caves on the planet, and the most profound among them is Veryovkina Cave, surpassing 7,000 feet, 2,314 meters, in depth. To put it in perspective, that's akin to stacking 23 Statue of Liberties atop one another. The entrance to Veryovkina Cave sits at an altitude of 7,500 feet, 2,286 meters, necessitating a literal mountain climb to access it. Upon arrival, one is surrounded by rocky cliffs amidst the mountain ranges. And amidst these cliffs lies a seemingly unremarkable hole in the ground. It's apparent it's a cave entrance, but one never anticipates its descent extending for over a mile into the earth. Upon its initial discovery in 1968 by a group of spelunkers, they delved only 377 feet, 115 meters, before resurfacing. Later, in 1983, a separate team from the Perovo Speleo Club in Moscow rediscovered the cave. Over the following 3 years, a series of expeditions probed its depth to around 1,400 feet, 427 meters. However, inexplicably, no further explorations occurred until 2000. Resuming that year, it wasn't until 2015 that a new shaft was unearthed, revealing Veryovkina Cave's true depth. By 2017, the cave's maximum depth extended from 1,400 feet to 7,200 feet, mapping over 17 kilometers of tunnels and passages. Finally, in March 2018, the cave's official nadir was discovered at the base of an underground lake, where the cave intersects the water table, solidifying Veryovkina Cave's total depth or 2,212 meters. 6 months later, in September, the Perovo team returned, accompanied by photographers Robbie Schoen and Jeff Wade. Led by team leader Pavel Demidov, the same team of elite cavers from the Perovo Club that conducted seminal descents of Veryovkina and other deep caves in the Gagra mountain range returned. Their expedition aimed to collect samples of potentially undiscovered species and explore promising horizontal passages at the cave's base, while documenting the entire venture with Robbie and Jeff. In an average cave of moderate depth where one can ascend and descend within a day, a considerable amount of equipment is still necessary, including food and extensive climbing gear for each team member. In caves as vast as Veryovkina Cave, the descent mirrors an expedition akin to climbing a tall mountain. If you've ever explored anything related to Mount Everest, you might be familiar with the multi-camp system, establishing camps progressively higher up the mountain to store supplies and allow climbers to rest between ascents. For multi-day expeditions in mountains or sufficiently deep caves, transporting the required gear becomes too much for a single trip. In order to safely explore Veryovkina Cave, numerous trips up and down are required to transport all the necessary equipment. This cave, being extremely deep, has a total of 6 camps set up at different points along the path leading to its bottom. Before delving in, climbers suit up with specialized gear, clothing, harnesses, and helmets equipped with headlamps, they commenced their descent down the initial shaft into the darkness, navigating through a series of narrow passages and tunnels to reach the first camp situated at 2,000 feet, 610 meters. This particular camp serves as a permanent storage space for emergency gear. Over the next 4 days, Robbie, Jeff, and the Perovo Speleo Club meticulously progressed, eventually reaching Camp 6, tucked away at 6,900 feet, 2,103 meters. The temperature throughout their journey hovered just above freezing. Their journey was a challenging one, involving crawling through mud and water, maneuvering through impossibly tight squeezes, and rappelling down a 100-foot, 30.5 m, shaft using only ropes. These ropes were their sole means of transportation in and out of the depths. Upon arrival at Camp 6, situated in a vast horizontal tunnel with flat sandy terrain, they established their base for the rest of the expedition. Over the following 3 days, the team embarked from their camp to accomplish their intended tasks. Among these was guiding Robbie and Jeff to the bottommost point of the cave. Upon reaching the lake at the base, the sight that greeted them was breathtaking. The lake, adorned by turquoise waters and surrounded by jet-black limestone, revealed its beauty in the darkness. The lake stretched out 50 feet, 15.24 meters, in length, 25 feet, 7.6 meters, in width, and plunged to a depth of 28 feet, 8.5 meters. Without the lights brought along, the area would have been completely colorless and shrouded in darkness. Everything seemed to be going according to plan until day 7, when 2 team members had to depart early. As they ascended to Camp 3, an unexpected event unfolded. Water began cascading into the cave. A massive storm on the surface had caused a sudden flood, sending torrents of water gushing into the cave's depths. Inside caves, communication wirelessly is near impossible due to the thick layers of rock. Hence, cavers rely on a physical line running the cave's entire length for communication. The 2 departing team members immediately utilized this line to warn others about the incoming flood pulse. Initially, those stationed at Camp 6 didn't seem overly concerned, as handling flood pulses was part of their expertise. However, their confidence wavered as the roar of rapidly approaching water became deafening. Despite being positioned at 6,900 feet, above the total depth of 7,200 feet, they realized that for the water to reach them, it would need to fill up 300 feet, 91 meters, of passages below. Roughly half an hour after the warning call, the distant rumble of water heralded its imminent arrival. Gradually growing louder, it resembled the approach of a thundering train. As it neared camp, the sound was nearly deafening, shaking the entire cave as if it were in a constant earthquake. Robbie, in the midst of preparing breakfast, hurriedly emerged from the tent as the noise intensified. The sight of a roaring column of water pouring down from the vertical shaft stunned him and the others. Despite their expertise, Robbie, less seasoned than the Perovo team, couldn't help but feel deeply concerned by the sheer volume and speed of the water rushing into the cave. As the flooding persisted for about 2 hours, the team found themselves in a dry spot, attempting to keep calm, much like their Russian counterparts. However, a member noticed a gurgling sound emanating from a small hole near their tent. Investigating it, they saw no water but felt it necessary to inform the team leader, Pavel. Concerned, they decided to check a nearby siphon to gauge the rising water table. Upon their return, they looked back at the hole. This time, water was visible, rising rapidly and almost spilling out. A glance at a team member's face signaled alarm. Robbie knew immediately they needed to evacuate, and fast. Amidst the deafening water sounds, chaos ensued. They hastily packed essential gear, donning latex suits over their fleece layers, abrasion-resistant nylon shells, and harnesses. Robbie faced the tough choice of leaving behind his costly camera gear and personal belongings. Realizing any delay could endanger lives, he hastily saved the memory cards, stashing them in his suit for the photographs. with a call to start their ascent, Robbie and Jeff embarked on their climb, leaving behind the Russians at Camp 6. Meanwhile, the Perovo team awaited their leader, Pavel, before beginning their ascent. Navigating towards the vertical ropes, Robbie and Jeff encountered a narrow traverse resembling a bridge along a wall. Previously an empty chamber, it was now nearly flooded, reaching the bridge's edge due to the rising water. At the traverse's end, where the vertical ropes terminated, water gushed in from the shaft above. Robbie, under the deluge, clipped his ascenders to the rope and began his ascent. The force of the water was overwhelming, nearly suffocating him. Managing to create a small air pocket under his helmet, he focused on the white rope, moving his ascenders as fast as possible. Finally, finding a ledge to step onto and escape the waterfall, Robbie glimpsed a shoulder-sized hole from which the water violently surged, appearing like a fire hose consuming the entire space. He realized he couldn't make it through the intense downpour. Yet, as the lead climber with the rest following behind, he had to attempt it. Uncertain of the conditions below, he had to try. The force of the water allowed him to move ascenders only inches at a time through the squeeze. He made it, realizing Jeff had to do the same. Climbing higher, he entered a dry section, a stark contrast to his frantic ascent driven by adrenaline. Jeff, catching up, urged him to slow down, snapping him out of his frenzied state. They continued together, relieved to be alive, wondering about the team below. Reaching Camp 5 at 6,200 feet, they anxiously awaited the Russians. Amidst the cave's tremors, a distant headlamp emerged below. Andrei climbed into camp, signaling hope. But his silence about the others worried them. Together, they pondered the worst-case scenario. Down below, the Perovo team faced challenges. The flooded bridge forced them to swim to reach the ropes. As Pavel ascended, the chamber transformed into a whirlpool, testing their struggle against the raging waters. 15 minutes after Andrei's arrival, 5 more lights appeared, signifying the team's ascent. Watching their resilience, Robbie reflected on their fortunate timing. If they had been the last to ascend, survival might have been uncertain. Their safe arrival in camp brought laughter and relief, yet Robbie remained rattled, constantly checking for rising water. 200 feet, 61 meters, above, a horizontal passage filled with water blocked their path. Trapped until the flooding receded, they hoped it wouldn't rise further. Pavel assured Robbie they'd wait until morning for the water to clear. Over the next 16 hours, the raging waters gradually subsided, ending a 20-hour flood triggered by a week of relentless rain, followed by a severe storm. The raindrops were reported to be the size of nickels during the storm. This harrowing experience prompted the team to reconsider their assumptions about cave flooding, leading to plans for improved surface monitoring and additional escape points in lower chambers. Despite the expedition's abrupt end, they had accomplished most of their objectives. New tunnels were meticulously mapped, unique cave species were methodically catalogued, and despite the loss of critical camera gear, the invaluable photographic documentation remained intact. However, the annals of Veryovkina cave were destined to recount another harrowing incident. November 2020 witnessed the observance of a flagrant breach within the cave's sanctity, a rope found anchored at its entrance. This flagrant disregard for the cave's protocol posed potential hazards to the unprepared and raised grave concerns among seasoned explorers. 8 months later, on an August day in 2021, the intrepid Perovo team returned to resume their exploration of Veryovkina cave. As they descended to the depths, navigating the intricate labyrinth, they encountered curious relics, abandoned crampons and an ice axe. The perplexing discovery defied easy explanation, as these items couldn't have merely tumbled from the entrance. Their presence hinted at a more cryptic narrative. Undeterred, the team pressed forward, methodically reaching the permanent camp at 2,000 feet, 610 meters, the secondary encampment at 3,200 feet, 975 meters, and finally, at an astonishing depth of 3,600 feet. In the heart of the cave, a chilling sight greeted them, a solemn tableau of tragic fate. Amidst the unfathomable depths, the remains of a fellow adventurer lay in a state of advanced decay. Dressed in rugged camouflage overalls and sturdy tracking boots, the figure sported a helmet and clung to 2 cell phones, his only remaining connection to the world above. Tethered to the very rope that had once anchored his descent, the passage of time had mercilessly taken its toll. Forensic analysis painted a haunting picture, suggesting that this lone explorer had succumbed to the cave's unforgiving embrace many months prior. Though bereft of identification, the deceased was eventually identified as 37-year-old Sergei, a somber revelation made possible through a painstaking search of missing persons databases. The breakthrough in the investigation came with the extraction of pertinent details from the cell phones recovered from his person, unraveling the heartrending tale that ultimately led to his untimely demise. He also didn't tell them where he was going, despite the fact that he was heading to a location that fewer people had set foot in than the International Space Station. Based on the documents and screenshots found on his phone, it seems that Sergei had spent almost a year planning this trip. He had printed out maps and materials from the expeditions made by the Veryovkina team specifically to navigate down into the cave. First, he made the ascent up into the mountains, to the cave entrance using his crampons and ice axe. Then, he fixed a rope to the opening and descended down into the darkness of Veryovkina cave. Using the information that he had gathered from the Veryovkina team, he hauled all of his equipment in 3 transport bags through the tunnels and narrow passages. Then, using a lattice descender, he traveled down the massive vertical shafts all alone. He successfully made it to the first camp and then left some of the equipment later discovered by the Veryovkina team and then proceeded almost directly to the second camp. It was determined by the excrement found on site that he lived at the second camp for about a week before descending further into the cave. From the second camp, things got a bit more challenging. Beyond that camp, there are some larger and more technically challenging vertical shafts. In addition, the cave becomes significantly wetter from that point onward. As any caver knows, proper equipment is crucial. The standard fleece underlayer with a waterproof outer layer is crucial to surviving the cold and wet subterranean environment. It's unclear exactly what happened in Sergei's last moment, but it seems as though he realized that he wouldn't be able to descend any further through the water with the equipment he had. At which point, he would have tried to make his way back up the cave, but because he had already descended into a technically challenging area, he was unable to get back out. Sergei had brought ascenders for his hands, but he didn't have any stirrups for his feet, meaning that he had no footholds for any of the long vertical shafts. He must have tried to make his way out of the cave, but between the exhaustion and the cold, he eventually laid down to sleep one last time and never woke up. Upon finding his body, the parade team went back up to the surface and alerted authorities. Due to the difficulty of the cave and the depth that Sergei's body was found at, it would take a team of over 100 individuals to eventually retrieve it. It's also particularly risky to be in a confined space like a cave with a decomposing body because the gas that's given off from the decomposition process can build up and become toxic at high enough levels. Despite how many people were involved in the rescue, they still ended up having to cut Sergei into pieces to successfully remove him from the cave. After his retrieval, his body was finally returned to his wife and kids in Sochi. For now, Veryovkina cave is the deepest cave on Earth. But the Earth is a big place and caves are not nearly as readily viewable as their mountain counterparts. Veryovkina cave was only crowned the deepest in 2018. It remains to be seen whether it will hold its place as the deepest on Earth. Hello everyone. My name is Ibrahim and welcome to Horrible Stories. If you made it this far, I just wanted to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a like. That helps out with the YouTube algorithm. And once again, Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully, I will see you in the next one.